Hey, what's happening? It's Courtney, of course, and tonight we have a very, very special episode because I have a very, very special guest. Who I have here today?
Tiray, what's good, y'all?
This is my brother Tiray. As y'all have been seeing in my other episodes, I have been promoting his book, Love Never Ends. If you guys have not went and got it, go to Amazon. I will leave the link in the description down below. Go get the book, y'all. He also has another one on the way, but that's for later. We're going to be interviewing him today, and we're going to get into all the tea and everything that you want to know, would want to know. Your grandma might want to know, your wife might want to know.
We just gonna have a conversation, y'all.
We just want to get into this juicy conversation, so let's just get straight into it. So, Love Never Ends. Yeah. Where did that title come from, and what does it mean to you?
Love Never Ends came from, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this again. You know, you were supposed to be the first person to interview me, but
I was.
That's okay. That was okay, because everything on God's Son. But anyways, I got the title from, I think it was First Corinthians 13, when it's taught, there's a scripture, the chapter is talking about love and how it endures. You know, love endures and is kind and patient and all those other types of things. That's where I got the title from.
Okay. What about the cover art? It's a very, very unique cover. I'm gonna insert a clip of the cover so you guys can see it close up. Where did that idea come from?
It came from the Navy. It came from my time in the Navy. Actually, when I was on deployment, we was on our way back home. If I can just tell you the whole story. On our way back home, it was raining, and I actually took a picture of the fan tail of the ship and just looking out. And I remember there was many days being on the ship and just looking out on the fan tail, and we're just looking at the water, and that's the only thing you see out there. And for the longest time, until I had to go through therapy, trauma therapy, but for the longest time when I would look out into the water, I would see nothing but death. And that's where the title came from. And after therapy, whatever, actually I was doing, I think it's called art therapy. And just, me growing with my relationship with God and whatnot, I began to see lights again. And that's where the cover art came from, yeah.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, my brother was in the Navy. He was in the Navy for
8 years.
8 years. He is retired. He over with it. He through with it. And so in the book, if you read it, if you have not, go get it.
Go get it.
He talks about, some of the things that he's experienced and went through while in the Navy as well. So speaking of that, there's a chapter, my favorite chapter in the book. It's called Love Bears All. It's about Monet, that's his wife. It's a very intimate chapter, which is why I like it, because I'm just that type of person. Can you explain, for those who don't know, what the medical condition was that your wife was suffering from? What is it? For those who don't know, or who have Googled it and it's still not ringing a bell.
Yeah, so it's called vaginismus. And it's basically, when the vagina it tightens involuntarily and whatnot, and it causes sex a lot of pain.
Okay. So when you first found that out, like I'm talking about when you first found it out, that moment, what was your thoughts? What were you thinking?
Well, it took us a long time to figure out what it was. Monet she had never, had sexual intercourse or nothing like that when we first met. She was a straight up virgin. And so we didn't know. I'm thinking I'm putting in work. The first time we did something, she crying and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm doing the goddamn thing. But she was really crying because it was causing her a lot of pain. And so, going through marriage and whatnot and going through something like that, it was really, really tough on our marriage. And there was a lot of doctor's appointments and talking to doctors, and some doctors not understanding, and they're doctors and they're still not understanding what she's saying. They talking about recommending drugs, they recommending alcohol, they're recommending, saying she too tight, I'm too big, or maybe I'm too rough, like just all types of stuff. And we're like, no, we're looking online and, we're seeing other people who gone through this thing, even though we never met them, but just reading online. And so the first thing that popped up on my mind, shoot, at least it's a label on it, I guess. I don't know. I mean, shoot, we still dealing with it. So.
Well, did you feel disappointed? Like, dang, okay, so now it's this condition. We ain't gonna never be able to,
I don't want to say that in my mind we'll never, because I'm just not that type of person. I don't think like that. However, I was thinking like, God, like, why her? Like, I don't want to say why her, but I think I was thinking like, God, like, yeah, why did you tell me she was the one? If you know what type of person I am, like I didn't understand, like, why in the world did you tell me she was my wife and we're going through this thing, God, when are you gonna take this from her? When are you gonna heal her? Stuff like that was going through my mind.
Okay. In that same chapter, you also wrote about having to go back to watch porn, but you had been delivered from watching porn, back in, when you had got delivered. How did it make it feel, being that you were set free, and then instead of moving forward and progressing, you went back and started back watching?
Yeah. I don't know if I was per se delivered from watching porn. I think that was a personal thought. I know I was delivered from pervertedness. But watching porn, I'm not sure. And it didn't feel too good. It felt like I was going back to what God had brought me from a lot of times. However, I didn't know how to deal with what I was dealing with at the time. And it was that, when that happened, that was still in the beginning of our marriage. And the person that I was talking to about how should I, deal with this thing, they had recommended watching porn. And in my mind, I'm like, nah, that's not me. But then at the same time, it's like, dealing with all these different feelings and emotions, how else am I supposed to, deal
Believe
with
yourself,
Yeah. So it took a long time for me to, I guess, find it. And I couldn't use, I don't want to skip ahead, but I didn't like using toys and junk like that. Using a toy made me feel like a pervert again.
Yeah.
It made me feel like a pervert and like I was nasty and junk like that. So I wasn't getting fulfilled in no way. Porn wasn't even fulfilling me. So yeah, I mean, we ended up finding, or Monet ended up finding these ring things. You put the rings on the dude, you put these rings on or whatever, and it's supposed to only put, be able to let you go as deep as you want to and whatnot. And
it helps.
I ain't gonna say it helped. I mean, she might say it helped, but for me, at least we getting some out of it.
Were you embarrassed? Like, when you would go and talk to God, pray to God, were you embarrassed?
No, but I was embarrassed to talk to my spiritual leaders. Because at the time when me and Monet had got married, we didn't have the support from our church leaders, and we didn't have the support from our friends and stuff like that. So I was embarrassed to go to them and say, hey, we're dealing with this. How do we deal with it? And maybe if I would have went to them instead of going to outside people, people who wasn't living their life Christ-like and weren't pursuing God and all those other types of things, maybe would have been able to get help sooner. Maybe it wouldn't have lasted so long. But there was pride in the midst of that, in the midst of the embarrassment as well, because I didn't want to go talk to them when I should have.
So when you were in the process of writing, because I can only imagine it took you, a course of time. I mean, you just didn't sit and write the book all in one night.
It took.
So when you were writing about, the situation in your marriage, did you ever think like, dang, I shouldn't say this because when people read this, what if it's gonna embarrass my wife? What if it's gonna hurt her feelings? Like, did you think about how it was gonna make Monet feel after writing it, after the book came out?
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt the course, but it took about a year to write, and that's because there was a lot of stuff that was going on. I felt like God was just giving me things to write about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, had those things that happened in the last year didn't happen, I feel like, you know, I wouldn't have had anything to write about. So it was a lot of like back to back to back to back stuff happening, and so it gave me some stuff to write about. But to answer your question, I was trying to be as honest as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would talk about, you know, Monet's chapter, I just let her read it before I put it out. I told her, hey, this is what I'm talking about. I'm gonna try not to be. I tried not to tell your story. I didn't want it to be, you know, too private. I mean, too in depth with hers, because that's her testimony as well. So I tried to give them the gist of what was going on, but at the same time, still give that sense of honesty, still give that sense of intimacy with my readers. So I just tried to balance it out.
So in just a few sentences, what advice would you give to another man dealing with their wife or their woman with that same condition?
Well, of course, you have to have a spiritual.
I'll tell them.
Sorry. You gotta have a spiritual foundation. I mean, you gotta have a spiritual foundation. And when I say spiritual foundation, I mean, me personally, I feel like you have to talk to God about that, because to me, He's the only one. I mean, He created our bodies, you know, and He does allow certain things to afflict us and whatnot. However, He's the only one who can, in my opinion, cause complete healing. And that's what Monet had to. It took healing and deliverance for that to happen. So you got to have some form of just a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, with God and whatnot. And I say Jesus Christ because the Bible says you can't go to God without going through Jesus, without having Jesus. So Jesus is important. There's no God without Jesus. And at the same time, you gotta have a community. You know, you gotta have people who you can talk to and vent to. You gotta have people that you trust, and people who just not gonna give you no bull crap like watch porn, you know, cheat on your wife, you know, talk to this person, you know, stuff like that. I mean, that's not what men. We don't want to be cheating on our wives. Like, we want our mission is to love our wives and love our wives through all of those things, not to further hurt them because, you know, we're being quote unquote selfish. You know, marriage requires sacrifice, and unfortunately, you know, that's a huge sacrifice. In how I felt about it, it was a level of death as well. And how men say all the time, yeah, I'll die for my wife and all this and the third. To me, although it's not, you know, physically a gun to my head dying for my wife, in my head, essentially, I was dying for my wife because on the inside, it felt like I was dying. Because it wasn't just sex, it was intimacy as a whole we were fighting through. So you gotta have a spiritual foundation. You gotta have people who you can talk to, who you can vent to, people who will support you through it and encourage you through it and to help you and your wife through those things. I am, even though me and Monet never been to therapy, I am an advocate for therapy. You know, I really do believe we as a people need to have and need to see therapists who can help us through all the trauma of our past and whatnot. It sucks, unfortunately. Even having God in your life, we go through different things. And so we need people who can talk to, and sometimes, you know, retrain our minds. The Bible talks about renewing our minds. And when I went through trauma therapy, that's what I had to learn to do, renew my mind. And I had to learn new techniques on how to retrain my mind and to think. And, you know, stuff like that. And fortunately, I use scripture to, you know, retrain and rethink and stuff like that, renew. But it worked out.
Okay. You did share quite a bit in the book. I mean, every chapter it was something. Did you have to overcome any uncomfortability while writing? Like, dang, should I say this? Should I talk about this? Is this too personal? Were you uncomfortable at any time during your writing process?
Yeah, I don't think so, man. I really don't. When I would begin to write, I would just really ask the Holy Spirit to help me write everything. You be this king. You let your hands write for me. So I don't think that I felt uncomfortable writing. I'm really an open book, and I believe that to win souls, you got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable to win souls. A lot of people sometimes you got to get to the meat. And a lot of times people, in my opinion, sometimes they don't fully receive if you're not fully giving them everything. And sometimes I feel like, you just gotta, even if it's embarrassing, it might be hard to talk about, it might hit a certain place in their hearts and their spirits and their minds if I completely give them me as a whole, and essentially die to my flesh.
All right, y'all. We're going to take a really quick breather. It's getting really warm and spicy. And I want y'all to continue to get all the juice and all the tea. We're going to take a really quick break, and then we're going to come right back. All right.